All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our 12th annual Wild Wisconsin Winter Web Conference. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Jamie Machek with the Wisconsin Valley Library Service, and the conference coordinator, and assisting me in the track internal communications is Jean Anderson from the South Central Library System. We're going to get right into it. Our third presentation as part of this track is on email etiquette with Doug Crane, who is with us in Florida today and was just on a plane and got back in time. So Doug, take a deep breath and begin whenever you're ready.
All right, well, thank you very much. And thank you for the few minutes of patience while I got everything going. Well, it's wonderful to be here again. And I want to talk about email. It's one of those things that I love to talk about. I do classes on how to get to inbox zero and how to manage your workflow. But today I was asked to talk about effective email etiquette. So please be sure to open your chat window because I have a couple questions. Oh, I got a fan of inbox zero. Excellent. Good to see. So first of all, in the chat, I'd just like to know how many emails do you send at work per day? That is just you typing them, sending them out. If you're not sure, you can give a range, your best guess. I'm assuming you all have email, so you're probably using it. Okay, very good. Oh yeah, okay, I'm seeing anywhere from just a few up to maybe 25 to 30 or more. Let me see. Up to 50. Okay, yeah. So it's a fair bit. So think about how many you sent in a day, then multiply that by our 5 work days during the week. And then go ahead and multiply that by about, another 20 work days for, 4 weeks in the year and 4 weeks in the month, and then 52. You can get a sense that you send a lot of work-related email. So next question I have is, what are your biggest concerns regarding work email, aside from stuff I would deal in inbox zero with regarding volume or, urgency? What are your concerns of maybe more precisely about writing email, and being sure you're understood? Okay, there's concerns about email gets lost or isn't read, clarification, wordiness, saying the wrong things, yeah. That my tone is appropriate, yes. Tone is very important. That I've communicated my needs correctly, that people are reading the entire email, yes. Not including the right person, when to end a conversation, that you might come across too abrupt. Oversharing, will it make sense? Yes, those are very important concerns because when you're sending an email at work, you have to remember that you're doing this as a professional, right? And this is something that's going out there. It's representing you. It's representing your organization. So we want to make sure that it, is good as it can be. And also that you're doing it in a way that it gets across the understanding. So there's a lot of pitfalls regarding email. And I'm sure you've all lived through one of these, right? A meeting that could have been an email. It's a favorite saying. In fact, it's a book cover that I found out there. And certainly, we've all had that case where, why are we meeting? We could have had an email. But to be honest, the reverse happens as often, where we say, geez, I wish this had been a meeting instead of an email. Otherwise, we would have solved it a lot faster. I know I've had the experience where I'm in an email dialogue back and forth, and I realized, let me just pick up the phone and call. So I'm going to move through some tips here on sending email. And there's a number of different categories, and I'm going to kind of quiz you along the way. And one of the very first questions you should be asking yourself is, should I even be sending an email? So let me give you a few things. What are some good reasons to send the email? And I'm going to ask you just to type in Y for yes or N for no if you think this is a good reason to send an email. You should send an email if the building is on fire. Y for yes, N for no. Okay, good. I'm seeing a lot of people understanding no, not the best thing. All right, next one. Requesting a meeting. Is that good to send an email about? Okay, yep. I'm trying to give you the easy ones first. Okay, how about sharing thoughts on the football game from the weekend? Yes, no, in your work email? No, okay, a lot of you are saying no. Maybe because Green Bay's out of the playoffs, it's not worth talking about anymore. Sorry to bring that up, hope it's not too soon. How about sending out a brief policy update? What do you think? Yes? Okay. Or there's a couple no's. Okay. And finally, how about just requesting numbers from colleagues for your monthly statistics report? Good idea to send an email? Yeah. So I'm thinking that other than the fire and the football game, the other three are pretty good reasons. And generally, here are the main reasons to send an email for something that's routine communication. You just want to keep people up to date, in the loop, letting them know if there's been a change. That's not something that needs to be overly communicated. Also, you might want to send an email to document something. An incident happened, a situation happened, or there's been an update that you want to make sure gets in the record so that if people are looking back through the chain of communication, they'll see, yes, Mary sent this on this day about the update to the dress code. Great. I also think scheduling and coordination are great for emails. You're trying to schedule that meeting, you're trying to schedule the work desk, you're doing different things. Email is a great communicator for that, and also formal communication. Someone is asking you as a member of that organization to respond to them. And if you think that sending it in an email, a little formal response, in a way, you might even have some of these already pre-baked that you just copy and paste in. Those typically someone emails you to say, hey, can you give me information on your opening hours? Or can you tell me when the next set of classes are? You can just copy and paste those in. Those are good reasons. But what are some not so good reasons to send an email? Well, first, urgent communication. If you got to get a hold of someone immediately, email is horrible for that because there are some who compulsively check it every minute, but there's others who may only check it once a day. Not a good avenue. Also, sensitive or confidential matters. It's really not appropriate to kind of like, say, put health updates in an email or some employee performance issues that you're having concern about in an email. Things like that that are better discussed or maybe some other avenues. Also, email is not great for complex issues. If you've got something that's a little unusual, unless you're very well versed in writing something that you think everyone's going to understand because you can condense it to its simplest form, complex issues tend to hang people up. It leads to a lot of misunderstanding. And finally, giving negative feedback. If you have to kind of reprimand someone, correct someone, email is not always the best way to do that. In part because it can come across very strong and very, definitive. And sometimes you want to talk to the person about it, to massage it a bit, to get some back and forth to make sure they understood why this feedback was being given. So that's where we start. Now, let's move into some of the complexities of building an email. How about subject lines, right? You'll have to put a subject line. In fact, if you don't do that, it might even annoy you saying, hey, put a subject line in, beep, beep, beep. So I'm going to give you some examples of subject lines. And you just do yes, a Y if you think it's a good example of a subject line, or N if you think it's not so hot. Okay, and remember, this is for a work-related email. All right, how many of you think, hey, is a great email opener for your work? Okay, no, all right, yeah, probably not, Fine for your personal, but probably not work. How about this one? Branch meeting time update. Yeah, probably good, assuming you're giving people enough advance notice, not 5 minutes ahead, but maybe a day ahead or more. How about this for an email subject line, for a professional email? Maybe a concern? Yeah, no. Okay, a lot of you are in agreement here. Great. This one, agenda item 3N1 for BCC meeting. Yeah, a lot of you are thinking, yeah, I'm wondering about this one maybe. Some of you are saying no. Okay, it's an interesting one back and forth. Or how about this one? Check out this great video. Yeah, probably not. Okay, so what goes into making a good subject line? You're kind of on the tone here. First of all, subject line should be clear and specific. Because when someone's looking at their email, the first thing they're going to notice from you is the subject line. Is it something that they understand that what they're going to open is kind of what their expectation is? So if you have a subject line like updated branch manager meeting time, people are going to understand, oh, that's about the meeting. Great. Or if it's like, hey, the whatever it is you're thinking about, if it's clear and precise, people are going to see it, they're more likely to read it. Action words. If the email is something that you want people to respond to, you probably want to put an action word in there, like say, please review document, or please review whatever, right? Please respond by 3 or something like that. Let people know that there's some urgency to it if there is. I mean, not all emails require urgency. They just might require people to review at some point in the next few days. That's fine. But if you need a response, please indicate that. The subject line is a good way to do that. Personalize when possible. Now, what we mean by this is, if you know you're sending it to one person or to a specific group, make sure the subject line is something they would understand, something that's in their alley. If you're sending it to the cataloging group, make sure maybe in the subject you say, hey, cataloging group, please prepare for whatever, please notice updates to policy, something like that. So, because when people get an email, they know it's to them, but they don't always know it might be to other people. So sometimes if you're sending it to a committee, you might want to put in the subject line, personnel committee or display committee, and then the action or rest of the subject line. Sometimes highlighting the value of it, right? Why should I open that email? If there's something indicating the subject like, hey, this is important, you're going to enjoy this. And also be mindful of tone. We're going to talk a little more in depth about tone later, but if you do the subject line with all caps, of course, we know all caps is like shouting. So people are going to be like, I don't know if I want to open that one. Or if it might come across as, like that thing, a possible concern. It's like, what do you mean? What is this? Is it about me? Is it about someone else? It's like, yeah, maybe not. All right. Now, let's talk about enormous emails. Anyone ever got an enormous email, like one that just goes on, that if you were to print it out, it would go pages and pages? Yeah, some of you have got that maybe. Okay, hopefully none of you have sent something like that. But let's ask you a question. How big is too big for email? How big is too big? How many of you think less than 100 words sounds good? Just go, yeah, less than 100 words, good. Everything good? Well, let's up the ante a bit. How about up to 500 words? And for reference, 500 words is about a page or two, depending on if you double space it, Yes, no, yes. Okay, some of you are like, okay. How about 1,000 words? You want to read 1,000 words emails? You think they're great? No. A lot of you are like, oh, someone's saying, yep, someone is. Oh yeah, how about 5,000 words? Anyone want to read a 5,000 word email? That's basically like a novella? No, of course not. And of course, I think you're all going to say no to saying there's no upper limit to the length of email. Now, why is this? Why are we, concerned about getting a super long email? Well, a few things is that, it's just hard to read a very long email. Our email is just not the appropriate avenue to do that. In fact, brevity in email is the key. The shorter the email, the better. Now, the key, of course, is not to make it so short that it's misunderstood, that people are like, what the heck are they talking about? They're in code? They're sending me emojis in this email? What do they mean? No, you want to, if you can condense it down, there's sort of, I think it's a saying in science, is any theory should be as simple as possible, but not too simple, right? So best to keep your emails pretty short. A paragraph or two is good. In fact, what I like to do in my emails is not do long paragraphs. I like to break down the points into their own sentences as much as possible, because it's just so easier for the eye to pick out the key points. And that's where you could also use things like bullets. These bullets are especially useful if you are trying to set up an appointment. And you say, oh, here are 5 different times I'm available. And if you put them in a bullet, that's great. Or if there's like 5 key changes that you're recommending to a policy, you don't need to write it down or talk to the person in depth. You just want to point out, oh, here's a mistake here, here's an error there, here's a possible improvement here. You can do bullets as well. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is avoid information overload. That is, having something so big and encompassing that people lose track. That's also why in email, you should stick to one specific subject for that email as much as possible. I know sometimes there might be the temptation, oh, I got to talk to my boss. I'm going to put 4 different ideas, unrelated, into this email to send them because I'm going to be efficient. Well, you're actually not being that efficient. And the reason is if you put too many different items in there, it just overloads. In fact, you're better off sending 4 shorter emails about each of those points than one big email. Now, you might say, but I don't want to overwhelm their inbox with 4 different things. Well, if you've been to any of my workflow classes, you'll know that actually one of the best ways to process email is to just have things that are one particular item so that you can say, oh, okay, this is the part about, topic A. This is the part about topic B. And if you send them in different emails, they can sort them out. Yes. And someone in the chat just mentioned too that if you do it this way, when they go back to search their email, it's easier to find because each one will have a specific subject, right? If you're saying this is the one about the computer lab, this is the one about the retention policy, this is whatever, right? The collection policy, whatever it is, that way too. So when you have too many and you're trying to put it in, it just is hard to process at the other end. Also, where possible, use hyperlinks, right? If there's additional information, especially like, oh, hey, there's this policy document or there's this article. Don't just try and copy and paste the whole thing into the email. That gets awkward to read. You're better off connecting them through the link because then they can go to the site. Because if it's like a news article, the website with the news article should be formatted for easier reading than an email. So why not send them to that? And then also they'll see the actual source and they might be tempted to look at some other things out there along the way. Just copying and pasting in. Also, of course, you could be in some copyright issues, copying and pasting stuff in. So use hyperlinks, especially if you have some database or central file storage area where you're pointing people to and you can link to it, use the link. Also, at the end of the email, have some closing and call to action. I mean, unless the email is just simply, hey, here's the update, keep it for reference, then obviously you don't need anything. But if you're saying, hey, I need to have a response, I want you to review this document, I want you to give me your thoughts, I want you to let me know the best time to call you, you want to be clear and concise about that. Because right now, as you know, many of you spend time looking through email, might be tired, it's 4 o'clock, you're thinking about going home. When someone is very precise saying, this is exactly what I need from you, and they don't have a lot of stuff in front to confuse, that is a great way to help someone along. And final thing with all email, please proofread and edit. I know email can be fast. You got something on your mind, you go, oh, type, send. Obviously, most email programs have some kind of spell check or maybe a grammar check. But as we know, those are not foolproof. Always take a moment after you draft the email to sit there and read it yourself. And this is important not only to make sure the content is accurate and you're saying it in a simple way, this is also going to be important for conveying tone later on. In fact, if the email is being sent out to someone very important or something very public, definitely send it to someone else you trust in the organization to review it as well. I mean, for me, if I'm responding to one of our county commissioners and it's something that I want to be very clear on, then I'm sending it to my deputy director. I might send it to one of the division heads for them to review because, I might not be the expert in it, but as the director, I'm the one tasked with responding. So I want to make sure it's factually accurate. And that people, if I've sent it to them, they can also say, oh, this looked a little unclear. I'm not sure if this sentence really communicates the policy effectively or the concern. Then you can edit and change before you officially send it out. Because once you hit that send button, it's gone. And you don't want to have to send up follow-up ones to correct it. That starts getting a little embarrassing, especially if you're dealing with the media. Because whatever you send to the media is going to be fair game for them to play with. Even if there was an error in it or correction, you try and correct it, sometimes they might not do it for you. All right, let's move on to the ultimate question, to CC or BCC. Okay, may not be the ultimate question, but it is a very important question. Whether you should, the old say carbon copy, or I've heard it referred to as computer copy, or blind copy. So let's just remember what's the difference between the two before I give you some scenarios. If you're sending something to a person, that means this is directly for them and you're wanting them to get the information. Now you could have multiple thems, but just one, you're saying this is intended for you. A copy, a regular CC, is when you want to let someone in the loop, but you're not asking that person to do something. And I'll dive into this a little deeper in a moment. And of course, a blind copy is where you've copied someone in, but no one else knows that you copied them. All right, let's see. Here we go. Here's some options for you. Let's play this. Should they to CC or BCC? If you are sending an all organization email, how should that go? To CC or BCC? Okay, oh, I've got a 2, I've got a BCC, I've got a 2. Oh, it's back and forth between 2 and BCC. Okay, now the 2s seem to be winning. Okay, well, we'll talk about that in a few moments. How about sending to the committee to arrange for the next meeting? Yep. A lot of you are like, okay, so 2, some of you might be in the old ones, 2. Okay, depends if you're, okay, there's a few people, trying to be a little more inquisitive about this. How about this one? Responding to an email from the manager who sent it to 20 people originally. Yep, okay, you're just saying respond to him. Okay, to the manager. Yep, all right. That would be a 2. But the next one, including supervisors in a response to a public complaint. What do you think about this one? Yep, a lot of you are saying CC, some of you are BCCing. Okay, interesting. And finally, writing to the local newspaper reporter about their public records request. Now, obviously, we're writing to someone, but if there's anyone else in the organization who should know about this, would you to them, BCC them, BCC them? I may have confused you a little bit on this last one. Sorry about that. Well, okay, there's a lot. As you can see, this one, there are a lot of different thoughts. Should I to BCC, CC? So let's talk about the best options when you're going to CC someone. Is there a dumpster fire option? I don't know. Maybe someone needs to build an email app that will allow that. All right. So the best options when you want to CC someone, copy them, is when it's just for their information, right? So for example, for me, I will email an employee, and then typically I'll copy their supervisor or their division head, just so they know that I spoke to them. I'm not asking for their division head or their manager to be part of the conversation. I'm just letting them know that, hey, I responded, I sent something to you. So I CC them. Also, sometimes you want to CC multiple parties so they're in the know. We may have had an incident. There was a plumbing leak in the bathroom. Well, you might be emailing the manager about it, but you might also want to copy the janitors or the facilities folks. You might also want to copy the other building supervisors so they know, oh, this has happened, It's just to let them know. Again, if they're in CC, they should be people that are not necessarily going to respond. They could if they want to, if they feel it's important, but they're not being asked to like they would a 2. Oops, sorry, jumped ahead there. Or to keep a record. Sometimes you are responding to someone, you just want someone else to know, right? You want to keep that person in the loop. You want to keep your HR manager in the loop. You want to keep your IT person in the loop, right? You want them to have a copy of what you said. Sort of similar to information, but it's more for record keeping. And then finally, as I kind of referred to in my prior example here, including supervisors or managers, because oftentimes they will like to know, keep them in the loop. Really, CC, if there comes down to one thing, CC is just about keeping people in the loop, letting them know. What about a BCC? When is it good to blind copy? Because I have to be honest right off the bat, blind copying people could be a bit of an ethics issue in certain situations. Why is that? Well, if you're blind copying people for the sake of kind of bringing them into something that might be private or confidential, and you're doing it, you're including people who maybe shouldn't be part of it, that's definitely a problem. Also, if you're sending something to the person, but you're not copying their supervisor or the appropriate other person who should be in the know, and they don't know the other person's been copied, that can get a little tricky if they discover. They're like, hey, were you trying to trick me? Were you trying to go around me? Because if they learn that other people got copied on it that they didn't know about, ooh, could be considered unprofessional. Also, well, another good reason, though, to use BC is to avoid the reply all confusion. Anyone ever had this where someone sends an email to 100 people in your organization, and then this one guy or girl or whoever it is, this one employee turns around, does reply all, and suddenly everyone's getting their response, and they really shouldn't have, right? Because, maybe it's from your manager of the health plan, and he's sending out something saying, oh, just be aware if you have a change in your health plan, please respond to me. Or you need to change your health plan, please respond. And then one guy replies to everyone and says, yeah, I got to change my doctor because of blah, blah, blah. And it's like, we don't need to know that. Don't do that. So if you're sending out sort of a generic email, something you're sending out to all organizations, and this is very good. If you're sending it out to everyone in the organization, it's often helpful just to put it as a blind copy. You'll send it to yourself, typically. Send it, put your email and send it back to yourself, but blind copy everyone else. Because when they open it up and they look at it, they'll see, oh yeah, this was intended to go to everyone, especially if you're put in as part of the subject line or as the opening of the email saying something like, to all library employees, or to all county employees, or to whoever it's going, to all members of XYZ branch. Then that way they all know, okay, yeah, this is going to everyone. I just got a copy on it. So if they do accidentally hit reply all, the only one they're going to reply to is you. Saves a lot of embarrassment, saves other people getting all these other stuff. And I've had people in organizations who have, when they've got one, a reply all on one of these, they wrote back saying, do not hit reply all. The virtual equivalent of biting their heads off, right? Another time, sometimes blind copying is good, is if you're introducing a new contact, right? Like you want to connect two people together, but you don't necessarily want, and you want a few other people to know you did. You could blind copy a few of those just to keep it simple, but usually you want to do it when it's not a private matter or a confidential matter. You're just doing like an introduction. And finally, blind copying sometimes for sensitive matters. You definitely, again, this kind of goes back to privacy and confidentiality. It's one of those things where you just want to be mindful that blind copying people, you want to make sure it's for the right reasons at the right time, because if you're doing something because people can easily think that you're trying to go around them, trying to confuse them, be careful with your blind copies. That's, I guess, what it comes down to. So these are basically, if you're trying to decide which one is which, these are some of your considerations. What's the most ethical use of the two, right? What's the most ethical use? Is it a CC, let everyone know, or should it be private, a BCC? What are the expectations of the people who are going to receive the message? Are they used to receiving like company-wide emails that don't have all the other senders on them? Are people used to using this blind feature? Because sometimes too, you want to check with your company policy, right? Your library's policy. Do they have anything that says when you should CC or when you should BCC? When you should do either one. You want to make sure you're following that. And finally, also keep in mind for reply and forwarding, if you send someone an email, as we mentioned, reply all will include everything. But also know too that when you forward the message along, and here's another good reason to consider blind copying sometimes. If you are sharing information with a group, anyone who gets that email could forward it on to someone else. If they're copied, just regular copied, their emails will show up in the thread, right? They'll see, oh yeah, Joe, Mary, Sue, all of them got it, and they'll actually get their emails. Sometimes, especially if we're sending it outside the organization, we may not want to let everyone else know whose emails are in there. Now, in a work situation, for all of you, your email is probably public record, might not be as much of a concern. Probably a little more if you're having people's personal emails, they may not want those shared as broadly. So there's a few things to consider when you're doing this. And I'm going to talk about public records laws in just a few moments. But again, copying or blind copying, you want to be very mindful about it. Oops. All right. How about attachments? Attachments are a very interesting thing to consider. So let's ask you, what is an acceptable attachment to an email? Again, Y for yes, N for no. Is it to send your personal vacation photos around to the group? No, right. Right, probably not, probably not. Is it to send out a PDF version of a policy update? Okay, a lot of thinking, yep, sounds good. How about the weekly meeting agenda? Should that go attachment? Okay, many of you are saying, yep, in agreement. How about the 200-page high-resolution PDF of the contract? Yeah, you probably don't want one of those big ones, right? Or quite simply, is anything fair game for an attachment? Doesn't matter if you can squeeze it on the email, it's good. Okay, yeah, you're all pretty much saying no, there's got to be limits to attachments. So let's talk about some of those restraints on attachments. The very first one to consider is file size. Do not send a ginormous file by email. In fact, your email server, either your server or the one you're sending it to, might reject the message entirely. And I've seen it as low as 5 megabytes. Sometimes it's higher, 10. Typically, once you get to 15 or 20, most email systems will kick it back just because it's too big. So if you have something that you need to send by attachment, but it's too big, there are certain ways in certain programs to be able to minimize it, do it in a lower resolution. I know there are tools out there to take PDFs, for example, that might be really big and condense them down to something that's more appropriate to send by email. Photos, especially, oftentimes when you take pictures, you might get such a high resolution photo that it's easily 20, 30 megabytes. Again, there are programs you can do to condense it down. And zip, yeah, someone just mentioned zip out there. It's sort of an older way to condense files. I don't think it's the best because then people have to unzip them and it could get tricky if you're especially on a mobile device. I would much rather condense the original file itself as much as possible. Also, when you're talking about attachments, make sure they're relevant. Sometimes people will think, I'll just attach these different things to it because they might be helpful. Just remember, every time you add an attachment, that's another thing someone else is going to open up. And if you remember my email class, people are not always happy about opening up emails. If you give them any reason to not look at your email because it's got 5 attachments, they may not look at any of them. So just consider, if you're attaching it, is it relevant? Is it important? The file format as well. Not every file is appropriate for it. There are some types of odd files that people may not have. We tend to assume everyone's got Office, but they may not. Or if there's a file that's specific to Apple that might not open well on a mobile device, think about your file format. Try and just use the ones that are a lot more generic, the JPEGs, the PDFs, things like that that are common across the systems. Also, a lot of times, cloud service is a good way to do it. You may have some sort of common share file, or you may use a Google Drive. Sometimes it's just better to put the attachment there and tell people, go there to find it, rather than having it clutter up emails, right? Where it could delay an email, could get kicked back. And oftentimes with those cloud services, especially if you're doing some joint editing of a document, you're better to put it on there, easier to collaborate, and it keeps it out of people's emails. And you just know, okay, here's the link, go get it. Also, it's a good idea in your email to indicate that there is an attachment. Now you might go, duh, they could see the attachment. But I don't know about you, but have you ever sent an email saying, yes, see the attachment, and you forgot to put the attachment in? It's a very Buddhist thing to do, drop your attachments. But be sure if you're going to include an attachment, make sure you got it in there, double check it. Because if you write, hey, check the attachment, sometimes the email program itself might alert you before you send it. You'll say, hey, it says an attachment, but I don't see one. You go, oops, okay, put it on. And privacy, also, finally, keep in mind for attachments, privacy and security. You really don't want to send confidential documents attached through email generally. Those are better off in some other format, or if you have to send one as an attachment, know what your company's policy is on confidentiality. There are ways that if you were to put something in there that says, confidential, or, for attorneys' eyes only, or something like that, that will help it protect it against public records, which I'm going to talk about in a few moments. Also be aware that sometimes your attachments could get flagged for security issues. So make sure your email is good. Make sure it's secured. Make sure any attachment is created through a genuine attachment creation kind of thing, so that it's not going to run foul of any security system. All right. Let's get to tone. Okay, what do you think is easy or hard to express in an email? Again, wire in. Humor. Is humor easy to express in email? I'm seeing a no right off the bat. No, 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 no. Yep. All right. How about sympathy? Do you think sympathy is an easy thing to share in email? I'm sorry for your loss. It might be a little easier. Might be. Facts or data? Is that easy to express in email or hard? Okay, I think that one's easy. Yes, easy to express in email. A logical thought. Ooh, I've just realized something. Email? No. Oh, this one's going a little back and forth. Back and forth. Final one, anger. Do you think anger is a good thing to express in email? Yeah, it's probably easy to express your anger in email, but is it a good idea to do it? Yeah. Okay, let's talk about tone, because the biggest problem you have in email is that people are just getting a few words, right? They're getting this thing electronically with no easy ability to express emotions, to express context, to express, someone's personality. I mean, really creative writers could probably get it across, but even they can be misunderstood. So a few things with email. First of all, always try and be polite in your email. Even if you're kind of upset about something or you need to do a little correction, just be sure to be polite about it. You don't want to be leaving an electronic trail of nasty emails out there, right? Always helps to be polite. Use clear language. This is not your time for creative writing class. This is the time to get across thought as simple as possible. Use clear language. If there's a lot of jargon and you're going to send it to someone who doesn't know the jargon, consider spelling it out a little bit more, using less jargony words. I mean, if you're two catalogers communicating together, knock yourself out with all the jargon you want, right? Otherwise, just consider that, because that's part of it. Consider the recipient. Sending it to a news reporter, they don't know nothing about what you guys do. Make sure you give them enough information so they understand it. Or you're talking to an elected official, you're talking to a member of the public. Consider what you're saying there in the simplest terms possible so they understand. Use those emoticons carefully. Don't go flooding your emails with any kind of those funny pictures or GIFs or anything like that. Generally, for business email, best to stay away from that kind of stuff entirely. And finally, be mindful of humor. As I said, sometimes you can get away with a light joke or a little exaggeration, especially if the recipient knows you and they're ready for that type of response. I'm admittedly a very sarcastic guy. I like making light of situations. So my immediate group, if I send an email, makes a little light of it, they kind of expect it, so they know it. But would I ever send something like that to a commissioner, to a mayor, to someone outside the organization who I barely know? Never. And if you're not sure, if you're thinking, how's this going to go over? Send it to a colleague first. Send it to someone you trust. Say, look, I was going to respond. Here's this email. Do you think this comes across okay? If they give you a thumbs up, you're good. If they say, this line here, it's a little iffy, I wouldn't include that languaging, then take that into mind. All right. A few things, just basic stuff is avoid overusing capitalization. We know that's shouting. Proofread for tone, first you and someone else. Address issues privately that should be private. Just say, hey, can we do a call? Can we chat? Can we meet at 2? I want to just discuss this. Oftentimes you can get it across easier in words with the person. And also know when to escalate and when not to. What I mean by this is if you're in an email and things are getting a little off, you might need to move it up to the next level, right? You're getting a little disagreement. You're like, this could be getting a little hot. Elevate it up to your supervisor. Elevate it up to the person who's more effective to deal with it and let them do it. For me, example, the county, I have a lot of facilities. We sometimes get people who are upset about something to do with our buildings or our property. And we have a county facilities department that tends to handle a lot of that stuff. So when I get questions like that, if I can't answer it simply, I send it off to them and they prefer that. All right. Someone mentioned it earlier. We have to dive into the perils of public records. So let me ask you a question. Is this a public record if you send it in an email? Lunch menus for the holiday party. Is that now part of the public record if you send it in an email? Yep, correct. How about staff health updates? Does that become part of the public record? A lot of you saying yes, okay. Policy changes in the public record if you send it by email? Yep. Jokes, do they become part of the public record? Or how about this? Anything sent by email is a public record. Yeah, the correct answer is all of the above, although I will give one little nuance here, and it's regarding issues of health, if it's covered under someone's ADA or FMLA or some other thing, that can be confidential and could be protected. But just remember, anything you put in email, it's the equivalent of setting it in stone. All right? Whatever you put in there. That's why email can be very dangerous, especially for public officials. I'm sure you've all read an article in the local paper where some reporter did a public records request and boom, 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 boom. There's some inappropriate emails that were sent by XYZ people, So first of all, know your company's policies around public records. Know what they're expecting. If there are ways to make it confidential or shielded to a certain extent from public records, they'll tell you what you need to do. Okay. Also understand the legal requirements. Each state has certain requirements around public records laws. I'm in Florida, and generally we have what's known as the Sunshine Laws, which make public records very broad. Other states may be a little more defined. I know at least in my state, there is the exemption, and this is pretty common, about people's borrowing records is confidential. So that could be something that could probably be redacted. But you probably don't want to send that in an email in the first place. Also remember, just use official email accounts. Once you start using your personal email to get involved in in your public role, you're now exposing your personal email to public records. And if you don't share that, you could be an issue. We've heard of politicians using private emails back and forth, and they should have been using official and get caught. And again, also be mindful of tone. What I mean in this context is when you write something in the moment, people may understand it. But if a reporter or a concerned citizen pulled it, will they appreciate your joke? Will they appreciate a comment that might have been made about a member of the public? No, be very careful around that. So here are some things to be very aware of. Always include sufficient details in your email. So if someone pulls it out, they're not going to get something that's so out of context it could cause an issue, right? Make sure it's part of a chain or something so people can say, yes, I understand. Again, be cautious with attachments. Because remember, once you include your private photos in there, if you send it just thinking, oh, I'm only sending it to Mary because she likes to see my cruise photos, guess what? Everyone in the world now can pull your cruise photos, And if it's embarrassing, guess what's going to show up in the newspaper? Again, use those, so meant CC, sorry, CC and BCC wisely. Be sure to, if you're copying people on it, it can spread out. Just make sure you're aware. And finally, if you have any questions about your public records laws, contact the legal experts for your organization, right? Or you might have someone who's the policy expert in your library, or you might have access to an attorney. If you have questions, concerns, do your research, check it out. Just because once you put this stuff out there, anyone could access it. That's the thing. All right, we're almost to the end here, but we got to talk a little about texting. Texting, lots of fun, right? Okay, because I know people text for work. I do it, you do it, everyone does it. So what is the best thing to text? Request for a quick phone call? Think that's the best way to use it? Yeah, I got to talk to you. Is this a good time? Yes, probably. News alerts. You saw something popped up on your news feed. Oh my God, everyone needs to know this. Is that a good use for text? Yes, no, maybe not. Again, it depends on what the news is. Do you want to use text to send out policy updates? What do you think? Texting policy updates? Probably not. How about the agenda for next week's staff meeting? Send it by text? Well, some people do, some people don't. Yeah, probably not. Or just everything, because texts are not public records, right? Texts are not public records at all. Oh, I'm kidding you here. I'm kidding you. Yes, texts are public record. And ever you write in a work context, whether it's on paper, papyrus, chisel it in stone, or put it in a text, it is public record. Remember that. A lot of people have been burned because they were chatting in a text with their colleague going, oh yeah, blah, 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 blah. And then, oh, public records poll, give us your texts. All right, here are my reasons, I think the best reasons to text. Oh, I said text like the cook kids. Oh, geez, sorry about that. Should have proofread. You see, this is a good example of proofreading here. Oh, that's right, your personal cell, yes, especially. Okay, so urgency, texting is best for urgency, right? If you need to get in touch with someone very quickly, send a text, right? Hey, I got to get in touch with you. Oh, building situation, call me immediately. Perfect. Or brief communication, right? We're running 5 minutes late for the meeting, or, hey, Mary's not going to make it in tonight. Can you come instead? Stuff like that. Texting for personal matters. So here's what I mean by that is typically texts are something that's more about personal, right? Like you're in touch with your kids, you're in touch with your spouse, you're in touch with your family, your friends. Texting is great for that kind of stuff, but you don't want to get too casual when you're texting at work, right? It's easy to kind of go back and forth, be fun, but again, remember they're public records. And the public doesn't want to know that we're having fun, so don't let that. Also, accessibility. If someone needs to pull up a text, is it easier than pulling up an email around that, right? Sorry, the question about personal cell. Yeah, if you do anything for work on your personal cell phone, that is a public record. Anything you do for work is a public record, whether you're using your own resources or not. That actually includes your home computer. If you're drafting documents for work on your home computer, guess what? They are public record because you're doing it for work. Doesn't matter that it's on your own. If you're polled, you're polled. Also, texting, when we consider about public records, sometimes it's very hard to print off text. There are some apps and stuff that will do that, but you just want to be careful about that. It's hard. All right, a few final thoughts on this. I hope it didn't scare you all, but I've given you a number of things. In fact, I usually include a slide here about my personal website, efficientlibrarian.com. I have posted the text of this talk, and it's a little more in depth, a little drier, but the text for this talk today is actually on my website, and I'm going to go ahead and type in. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'll go even one step better for you all. One step better here. I'm going to give you the exact address. Hang on with me. So while I do that, if there are final questions that people want to ask, this is the time to do it. So I'm done with what I've got to share. I'm going to go ahead and grab the link to the text for this talk today. And there it is in the chat. So sorry, I guess because I was a little late, there's not as much Q&A time unless people want to hang out. But please, Jamie, go ahead if there were questions.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you, Deb. Let's get to some of those questions. How does library public record law affect BCCing an email?
Okay, well, remember with public record law, whoever creates the record is supposed to be the custodian of it. So even if you blind copy someone, it is part of the public record. The thing to remember, usually with email though, your IT department is the one that controls the server, and they're often able to do the searches. I know in my county, if people want emails, our county IT is the one who actually pulls them and we review as needed. But just be aware, whoever you send it, if you create one, you send it, it's a public record, no matter if you TO'd, CC'd, or BCC'd people.
Okay, thank you. What is the efficacy of BCing someone outside of an organization but works in the same field on an all-staff email? Is it different if it is a personal relative, like a spouse?
For me, I would be very careful about BCCing anyone outside of the organization because, if they, to include them in on something, especially that's a work-related item, if they need to know about it, you're better off copying them in just for the record of it. Otherwise, people start thinking, oh, what are they trying to hide? Why did they not let me know? I mean, later on, if you want to forward it to them, it's kind of a little different. You're like, hey, this conversation happened. I'm including in it later. But even then, I want to always make sure that people know for me that they can trust me. That if they send me something or if I'm talking to them, I'm being professional about it. I'm being on the up and up. So that's why blind copying has its uses, but you want to be careful about doing it properly.
Did you come across anything that talked about how we should greet people, and then when is it okay to stop greeting? Like if we're doing a long response, a long reply, do we have to keep saying that person's name? Do we follow what that person says, or what do you typically do with that?
My rule of thumb is the first time you talk to them, do the salutation, hi, they respond back. But once you start getting into the thread, you don't need to do that again. Just keep the thread going. The only exception might be is if there's a gap in the time period of the thread. You started it and then you come back to it a month later. You might want to say hello again just to reacquaint the person. But if you've been going back and forth all day on a thread, just save yourself the keystrokes.
Okay. What about people who continually spell your name incorrectly? Is there a way to politely, should we be correcting them? Should we be, I mean, I know I've done it. I know I've had it done to me. I get a lot of different versions of my name. Is it something we let go? Is it something like we say, oh, hey, by the way?
That's the time you use the all caps and all the exclamation marks. At that time. I would say that if someone is getting your email a little bit, your name a little off, names are personal to us. If someone's just mistyping once or twice, that's something. But if you realize they're making an error, I would just send them a private email off to the side and say, oh, by the way, my name is this way. It's spelled Jamie with the I. I'd appreciate it if you spelled it that way. Just handle it off to the side as a private thing. I mean, you could send them an email if you want, but if you don't want it as a record, just call them up or talk to them next time.
Yeah.
Do something like that. And I know some people sometimes, they even in their email signature, they'll put phonetically how to say their name as well. I've seen that too. And of course, I think you've all seen the gender preference
Yeah.
he, him, etc., she, them, all those different options. So if you want to make sure people get that, you could put that in your signature. And that's probably the best way to address it.
I mean, I'm guessing replying and then spelling their name incorrectly is probably not the best way to go about
That's the passive aggressive approach. I
Not
don't know
that
if that flies
I've
in
never done
Wisconsin,
that.
but might fly in Wisconsin. I don't know. In Florida, they're more likely to pull a gun on you. So.
Okay, well, Doug, we are out of time. Thank you for an excellent presentation. And thank you all of you who participated with the yeses and nos that made it was a really just a fun, active webinar. So thank you so much. I hope all of you join us for our closing session for the conference that's coming up at 2:30. We have Ben Chan, who is a 9-time Jeopardy champion joining us. And I think that's going to be a really fun session. Again, please make sure you fill out the survey that will pop up on your screen. We appreciate your feedback. And hopefully I see some of you in a half hour. If not, have a great rest of your day. And so long.
Thank you all very much for coming out.